I've met with many people over the years who struggle with fear, whether they call it fear or stress or anxiety or panic or something else. And over those years, I've noticed that fear almost never travels alone. Fear almost always has a constant companion called shame. Shame, because we have this sense that fear means there's something wrong with us, that fear must be a sign of weakness. And whether we learned it from our parents, our culture, or maybe it's just part of our emotional DNA, somehow fear and shame are like emotional twins. We can't help but think that if only I were a stronger person, if only I weren't so emotional, if only I had it more together, I wouldn't be so afraid, so stressed, so anxious, feel so out of control. And sadly, for us as Christians, it's even worse. We typically don't just consider fear a sign of weakness, but a lack of spirituality. For us, it isn't just about needing to be a stronger person, but a more godly person. And we think to ourselves, if only I had more faith, I wouldn't be so afraid. If only I prayed more. If only I were more spiritual, I wouldn't be so stressed out. Does that ring true for you? And isn't it a tragedy that in the very moments we need God the most, we feel the least worthy of His love? Fear and shame seem to travel together. But this morning's gospel gives us an entirely different way of thinking about fear. Not fear as weakness, not fear as a source of shame, but really fear as a prelude to faith. Fear as an opportunity to locate God in the midst of the things that frighten us the most. Look back with me at this morning's gospel lesson. It's a story about fear as much as it's a story about Jesus. I mean, once you start looking for it, fear is everywhere in this story. Just take a look at the language. Terrified, cried out in fear, do not be afraid, became frightened. 4 times in 11 verses. That's not a coincidence. Matthew wants us to notice that fear isn't just a footnote in the story. And the story shows us how fear can awaken our faith rather than shame. So picture the scene. It's the middle of the night. The disciples are out on the lake and the boat is being battered. Waves on every side, wind against them, and no land in sight. And if that weren't bad enough, then through the dark, a figure comes walking towards them on top of the water. And the Bible says that they were terrified. And the word we have here translated as terrified actually means stirred up. It's a word that's sometimes used to describe a riot. The disciples were stirred up. A riot was breaking out inside of them. And who can blame them? They were caught in a storm, far from shore, in the dark of night, approached by a mysterious figure. But then Jesus speaks. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. And it's worth noting that the phrase, it is I, is more than just good grammar. In the Greek, it's ego eimi. I am. And Matthew records it that way on purpose. Recall that I am is the name God revealed to Moses out of the burning bush. Just a few chapters earlier in Matthew, Jesus is asleep in the back of a boat during a storm. And when he wakes and calms it, the disciples ask, "What sort of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Well, the Old Testament had already answered that question for them centuries earlier. The psalmist proclaims, "Your way was through the sea, your path through the mighty waters. Your footsteps were unseen." In the book of Job, he alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. And I know you've heard me say it before, but in the ancient world, the storm-tossed sea represents chaos itself, the home of monsters, the thing that swallowed up sailors and never gave them back, where you might well run into a ghost. And here is Jesus walking on top of it like he's taking a stroll in the park, telling them and showing them exactly who he is. But let's just pause here for a second to appreciate that the terror the disciples are feeling is not a foolish reaction. If we were on that boat, we would have been terrified too, right? They were in real danger. Terror is the natural response to what they were experiencing and what they think they're seeing. And maybe you feel stirred up today. Perhaps even terrified because you're being battered by the wind and waves of a storm. You're rowing with all of your might in the darkness against the wind, battered by illness, battered by heartache, battered by disappointment, battered by loss. And if you are, then you can begin to put off shame by giving yourself permission to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. Fear is normal. It alerts us to danger. It helps keep us alive. The disciples had reason to be afraid. You have reasons to be afraid. I have reasons to be afraid. Life in a broken world is dangerous. But fear alone won't rescue us. Fear helps us locate the danger, but it doesn't always help us find safety. Sometimes fear keeps us identifying danger when we actually need faith to step in and help us locate Jesus. Fear might see a ghost, while faith helps us to hear Jesus say, "Don't be afraid, it is I." You see, the disciples' problem wasn't that they were afraid. They just needed their faith to help them locate Jesus in the storm. So don't hear Jesus' words, "Don't be afraid," as some kind of rebuke, but an assurance of his presence. Help is here. It's a reminder that he is bigger and more powerful than anything that we fear. The Lord has spoken. He's with us in the storm. But that's not where the story of fear ends. Peter's ready to believe that Jesus is in the storm with him, but he still needs help. He says, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." He's still afraid. The wind hasn't stopped. The waves are still high. But now, even though he's still afraid, faith gives him a focus and moves him toward Jesus. Do you see how that works? Faith doesn't cancel out fear. You might say that fear is pushing Peter from behind, and faith is leading him forward. All of that to say, what I want you to understand is that fear is not the opposite of faith. Did you catch that? Fear is not the opposite of faith. Fear is an occasion for faith, because faith isn't an emotion. Faith is a focus of trust. You can be afraid and have faith at the same time. Are you with me? But then when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Wait, what happened? Well, fear is still with Peter. Fear is still doing its job, still directing him to the danger, and that's normal too. But the problem is that in his fear, Peter has lost his focus. Peter took his eyes off of Jesus and focused on the danger instead. And of course, Jesus doesn't let him keep sinking. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You see, we're going to lose our focus sometimes. Sometimes our fear is going to seem more powerful than our faith. But Jesus is bigger than the storms out there, and he's bigger than the storms that are in here. Just as he calms the storms out there, he can calm the riot that is breaking out in here. And when Jesus says, "You of small faith, why did you doubt?" we shouldn't hear that as a rebuke either. It's an invitation to more faith. Jesus doesn't expect us to never be afraid. He only invites us to use the faith that he's given us to keep returning our focus to him. There's a verse in Psalm 43, the psalm that the acolytes and I pray together in the sacristy before the service every Sunday. And in Psalm 43 it says, "Why are you so full of heaviness, O my soul, and why are you so disquieted within me? Put your trust in God, for I will yet give thanks to him, who is the help of my countenance and my God." Jesus' invitation to return our focus to him and trust. It's the same exhortation the Psalms have been giving us for 3,000 years. And that refrain actually shows up 3 times across Psalms 42 and Psalm 43. Why are you so downcast, O my soul? Put your trust in God. The psalmist seems to ask it, and then to settle it, and then to ask it again a few verses later. In other words, it's not an exhortation that fixes you once and for all. It's the invitation to a practice, catching yourself mid-spiral and then turning around over and over, because you'll need to do it more than once. And this isn't the last time that Peter will be afraid and lose his focus on Jesus, right? Likewise, our fears will at times make us more alert to danger than our faith does to Jesus' presence. And that's okay, because Jesus is always there, always ready to assure us, always taking us by the hand and lifting us above the waves. It is I am. Do not be afraid. Faith isn't fearlessness. Faith is turning and then returning to Jesus, who meets us in the storm. So what does that mean on a Monday, not just a Sunday? Well, you know what the storms look like in your own life. That 3 a.m. spiral that won't let you get back to sleep. The pains in your body that never seem to get any better. Worries about a future that just seem like a dark storm on the horizon. You're afraid. I'm afraid. And there's no shame in it. The question isn't whether or not you'll be afraid this week. You will. And so will I. The question is whether fear will keep us glued to the danger, or we will turn our eyes and turn our focus of faith to locate Jesus in the storm. To, instead of being afraid of ghosts, know that there is another presence with us to love and to guide and to hold and to rescue and to restore. And maybe that just means we cry out like Peter, Lord, save me. And trust that the I am that formed you is holding you. And if you don't have the energy to turn at all this week, if you're just spent, that's all right too. Jesus was already walking toward that boat before anybody called out to him. But we return our focus to him. We return our focus to him however many times it takes, toward the one who already knows your name, who's already in the water with you, the one moving towards you, the one who's never once let go of an outstretched hand. Fear is not shame. Fear is not failure. Faith is not a feeling you either have or you don't. Faith is turning again and again toward him. Amen.